Hello, hello. So in this video, we are going to think about the practical media literacy checklist, and we're going to think about how do we process news. Okay, so a lot of this information came from the fabulous "If Books Could Kill" podcast. Uh, which you has a journalist and a lawyer kind of go through how we process this. So let's start with a quick checklist first. So here are some practical skills that we can use. So first thing, we are going to, before we believe a story, we are going to identify what is the main claim. So if we strip away all the extraneous information or the hyperbole that comes along with it, all those kind of emotional language, what is the story actually about? And we're going to look for the evidence. What does the story use to support its claim? Is it anonymous, or are there actual studies and experts used within it? We are going to check the sources cited. So sources can often come from some quite innocent sounding sources, but if you start digging into it, they actually have political money behind it. They may even be a corporation behind it. So, information on you're wearing the wrong size clothing. If you look at who paid for that, it might well be a clothing company that actually paid for that research to be done. So consider whether experts support the claim. So quite often in a news story, there'll be a short little section, or if it's video, there might be even like one little sound bite from somebody who is refuting that claim, who is saying the opposite, and that might be the only time they use an expert opinion and it's disagreeing with the story. So be aware of that kind of thing. Okay, we need to examine the data and the statistics. I'll come back to that a little bit later. The average person doesn't really understand statistics, so can be easily manipulated by that. Look for the missing context. Is there something that we really need to know about this story, this situation, that would actually give you a different perspective on it? Maybe a more understanding, less judgmental perspective on that particular story or the people involved in that story. Okay, we need to compare primary sources where possible. Okay, so secondary sources is like they have heard it from somebody or they have read it somewhere. Primary sources, people who were actually there, people who were actually involved in the situation, in the story. Okay, can we actually compare that? Maybe the same people have been used in a different source, a different news story, and they have used a different part of their experience of that. So let us think about, before we are joining some kind of online outrage, before we start getting worked up, before we start getting emotionally involved in this story, what should we consider? Well, we need to determine what actually happened. Okay, so again, beyond the hyperbole, beyond the emotional, breathless reporting, what actually happened? Okay, so we need to ask what evidence exists and be wary, so be cautious about old content that's suddenly resurfacing. If suddenly there is a tweet or a post that is from 10, 15 years ago by somebody, you have to consider, why is that suddenly so important right now? Okay. Question why the story is gaining attention now. Again, timing is everything. What makes the story so important right now? Okay, if it's a scandal that's being broken, why is now an important time? Often this information has been out there for a very long time, or it's been known by people on the inside. So we need to consider why are we being told about it right now? Okay, we've got to consider whether social media amplification is distorting that reality. So quite often, when people get upset about a particular story or get very emotional about a story, they may start to exaggerate, may start to add their own details. And as people retweet or reuse those posts, the exaggeration becomes part of the story or becomes part of people's perception of that story. So we need to focus on the sources, not just the narrative. So, not just the story that we are being told, not just the events as they are described in the news. So, the sources. So, where is the journalist getting their information from? Okay, are they good quality sources? Are they insiders? So, a little side story often when a political story has an inside source, the inside source is quite frequently the politician they are writing about. So there is um, some advantage for that politician to leak a story in advance, pretending to be an anonymous source within the government. So that happens quite a lot. So let's all be a bit skeptical, a bit cautious about stories that rely on quotes from officials, including the police, because obviously, quite often, the police have a certain advantage in giving their particular version of it. Anecdotes just from random individuals. Quite often, if a story is about a minority group in a country, the news will interview people, and the caption underneath their name is just community leader. Well, uh, nobody votes on that person, right? So how have they found this person? And in reality, quite often it's just somebody that the news cameras stop on the street, and they'll say, "Are you a community leader?" And they will say yes, and there is it. Suddenly, it's one person's opinion counts for the whole group. Okay, so we've got to trust stories when they include uh, much more relevant details, statistics, and again, with good sources. How are they defining the crime? So, for example, we know the word stalking. However, in a lot of countries, stalking is kind of casual, almost like pop culture way of describing that act. There is no law that is against stalking in a lot of countries because stalking is kind of casually used. So, research from specialized organizations, so organizations that have been studying this thing for decades. So, for example, if we think back to the COVID period, immunology organizations have been studying this kind of thing for decades and decades, and they have a lot of data backing it up. Expert analysis, and again, kind of find out where that person is coming from. Not all experts are created equally. So the key question is what sources are being used to support that story? Okay, so that's the key question to ask. We are going to think about basic statistical literacy. Now, the average person uh, doesn't really understand statistics that well. And you can even see this when every so often someone online will ask about on the weather report, what does it mean when it says a 20% chance of rain? Does it mean out of 100 days with the same conditions, it will rain 20 of those days? Or does it mean it's only going to rain on 20% of the area that is in the weather report? A lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't understand statistics. So headlines can be technically true, or news stories can be technically true, but actually quite misleading with the framing of that statistic or those numbers. So we always need to ask from what number to what number. So if you're being told something has increased or something has decreased, okay, don't give me a percentage. Give me a number from what to what. That could be very, very different. Over what time period? And again, going back to the COVID situation, there was a lot of crime reports after COVID saying, well, crime has increased. But that was in countries where they had a lockdown. So, of course, there are fewer crimes when nobody's leaving their house for a month at a time. So, over what period of time is a very important question. So, is the percentage change based on a very small sample? So, for example, the old 10,000 steps health guide, like you need to walk 10,000 steps a day to be healthy. That was based on a very, very small sample of Japanese businessmen. And yet, that is widely spread as kind of a true thing. Of course, it can't hurt, but again, this was based on a very small sample. The same with drinking 8 glasses of water a day. Like, nobody really knows the origin of that as a statistic. What was the sample size? We don't know. So, for example, subway murders doubled. Okay, that sounds really shocking. Oh my God. There are 2 times the amount of murders on subway now. But that could be an increase from 1 to 2, which of course is tragic. 2 people being murdered is tragic. But still, the statistical chance of you being murdered on the subway has basically not changed. Okay, it's a very, very small chance of you being murdered on the subway, as sad as that statistic is. So, the takeaway: percentages rarely give us enough context to fully understand it. So, we need to kind of find out from what number to what number, over what periods, is there a sample size that we can find. Low sample sizes basically don't mean much. Okay, so we need to understand basic statistics. So we're not being manipulated by double the amount of murders. Oh my God. All right, we need to evaluate claims and evidence separately. So, what is the claim being made? What is the evidence supporting it? So, the common problem that we have as news absorbers, some articles may present long narratives. Okay, so long stories, they're going way back. And those stories may contain emotional anecdotes. For example, hospital waiting times. You might get emotional anecdotes of, oh, my child was very sick and we had to wait 17 hours to see a doctor. Okay, and of course, we can all feel sorry for that kind of person. We may also include personal stories. Okay, but this isn't providing anything for the central claim. This is just kind of what in English we call anecdotal evidence. So these are just stories. So, of course, even take the most amazing restaurant that you've ever been to, you can always find somebody who didn't enjoy it, who hated it, who had a bad experience. And if you only hear from those people, your understanding of the quality of that restaurant would be quite skewed, quite unreal. So we need to think about the evidence of the central claim. So our key question is, what evidence actually proves that claim? And is it being provided? Okay, we need to avoid looking for simple rules, okay, or simple explanations. So no publication, even if you agree with them politically, is ever always right or always wrong. These stories are written or produced by human beings, and human beings make mistakes. Human beings are fallible. So no publication is ever right or wrong. There is strong and weak journalism. There is an editor and sub-editor that is checking the details, hopefully. But even with that, things will slip through. So here are some factors to consider. The reputation of the source. Is it a source that enjoys the extreme, let's say, enjoys kind of the emotional response, or is it a publication that has a reputation for very serious, balanced journalism? The journalist's credibility. Not all writers, not all journalists, not all TV news people are equally credible. So we've got to think again, who is telling us this? Statistical evidence, we discussed already. So the reality is that the media literacy, you really have to absorb it case by case, which I know in a busy world it can get exhausting, but always feel like if it's something that is especially causing an emotional response in you, it's always worth just double checking. There's no universal shortcut for spotting misinformation. Sometimes it can take a lot of digging. Sometimes it doesn't come out for a long time. Okay, so we need to seek expertise, not just news coverage. The news coverage is just a single source, so we need to dig in. So the goal is we're not just avoiding misinformation, okay, which is already difficult enough to do. We want to be well informed. Okay, and well informed means the information you have is accurate. Okay, your perception of that situation is accurate. So the better approach would be we need to check those claims with good primary sources, people who were there, or experts with good reputations. So crime researchers and think tanks. So think tanks are kind of organizations who literally think about a problem, think about problems and solutions. Employment. Can you actually get statistics from the website of the labor organization in your country or in that country? So we need to learn how to verify these claims independently. Okay, so we're not just relying on a story that you saw on social media or a headline that you skimmed that had some emotional words in there. Before we believe a story, just to wrap this up, we are going to identify the main claim, what is actually being said. We're going to look for the evidence, quality evidence, primary sources. We're going to check those sources. We're going to consider whether experts support that claim or people who have a lot of experience with that. We're going to examine data, statistics. What are they really saying? We're going to look for missing context. Is it being presented in bad faith, where the situation is deliberately missing some context that would make you feel differently? Compare primary sources where possible. All right, thanks for listening.